Hey gang, welcome, welcome, welcome. Eric Whitacre here. I am thrilled today to be talking to Maestro Grant Gershon. I'm going to bring him on in just a second here. I was thinking just last night about this, that when Grant became music director of the Los Angeles Master Chorale 20 years ago, I remembered it was a big deal. There's a long history of extraordinary conductors there at the Master Chorale. I'll talk to him about it when he's on. But almost immediately, there's this buzz happening from that part of town. Just something special was happening. And then in my own little corner of the world, I was living in London at the time, and I wasn't able to make it. I heard that Grant had programmed a concert that was music of Arvo Pärt, one of my absolute heroes, and mine, these two composers put together. And I was humbled. I was a little terrified by it because Arvo Pärt just is this unattainable genius level composer, and having my music on the same program is daunting. But then the audacity of it, that these two kind of connected worlds, but so disparate in terms of the kind of music and the way of approaching it. And then the Master Chorale was kind enough to send me a recording, or I heard it on a broadcast, I can't remember, but I got to hear the music making itself. And I was absolutely floored. I mean, just floored. Grant is this, it's hard to hyperbolize it. There's a sensitivity to his conducting, a musical intelligence that is so deep. And what he's done with the Master Chorale over the past 20 years is nothing short of phenomenal. It's just truly amazing. 4 years ago, I started my residency with the Master Chorale as an artist in residence. And that time has been such a period of personal growth and learning. I'll talk to Grant about this too, but I can't begin to describe how much I learned during that time from working with the group at such a high level, writing all of this music, and then just watching Grant do his thing. Really a singular experience for me that I'll treasure for the rest of my life. And so without further ado, let's welcome to the stage, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Grant Gershon. Grant, you ready? Here it comes, and boom, there you are. Hey, Maestro.
Hey, Eric, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You look great. The video is really clear, actually.
Hey, well, thanks. Thank you for that introduction. I felt like it was my eulogy, and beyond that. So thank you.
I don't know about you, everything these days feels like a eulogy.
It
is a strange time. So where do we find you right now? You're here in Los Angeles.
Okay, so yeah, I'm here in LA. We're in Eagle Rock. I'm here with my wife, the fabulous soprano Alyssa Johnston, and our two kids who are in school remotely. Sam's a senior in high school, and Claire is a junior at USC. And we have two giant dogs and a chinchilla. So there's a lot going on here.
And Sam is getting the worst of it because he's supposed to be graduating right now, and so he's missing all of that, right?
That's the thing, to all of the seniors, whether it's in high school or college, my heart goes out because it really is, to have the shutdown obviously happened the second week of March, before prom, before people had their high school musicals and spring concerts and just all of the things that your whole time in high school and college seems to be culminating towards. And so, it's a really challenging thing. Sam and most of the kids that I've seen are bearing up with remarkable good grace through it all, but it's weird.
Yeah, weird. And it makes me, I sort of wrote off the last half of my senior year in high school. I think we all did. But then you realize, had you not had that, just that sense of completion and the symbol, the very necessary symbol that you've completed a thing, and that this rite of passage, and that there's no substitute for it. I was talking to Esh, my 14-year-old son, and he was saying that he's got friends who are seniors, and basically what's happening is they're clicking graduate, right? They go on a thing, and there's not really a ceremony. You click, and so we were joking, you get this little balloon, yay. There it is. All right. The last 12 years of my life, yay. And I think by missing that rite of passage, it's going to be a strange time for those young people, and what that looks like on the other side.
Yeah, I've been seeing people online referring now to, instead of Gen Z, just calling it the pandemic generation.
Yeah.
Because this is really, it's really kind of what's going to define this whole group of young people. It's such an unprecedented and kind of transformative event. Again, for for the seniors, I think one of the hardest things is just, it was so sudden. I think here in Los Angeles, it was a Wednesday, and it was announced, we're not going to have school on campus on Thursday.
Yeah.
But nobody knew that was like the last time they were going to like be with their friends and classmates and stuff through the end of the year. And so that's just, I can't really imagine. Again, I partied kind of all through the second half of my senior year, and that's kind of what you do. But it was all about being together with your friends and just having that rite of passage.
Yeah, right. That symbol. I think I can't imagine missing that. When was your last performance, by the way, before all this happened?
So this was crazy. We were actually in New Zealand with this project that we may talk about later that we've been doing with Peter Sellars. But so we had a performance at the Auckland Festival on March 13th, Friday the 13th. And it was so surreal because at that point, the NBA had already announced that they were canceling the season. Tom Hanks, had
and he was in Australia.
He was in Australia, and so like everything fell apart 2 days before this concert, and it seemed like the whole rest of the world was spiraling. And New Zealand, famously, just seemed to be incredibly well prepared and well led through the crisis. So the festival went on, and we gave a performance on March 13th, and we all knew as we were giving that performance that this would be the last time we'd be singing together for a long time. It was like we were the last gig standing, and we were all just weeping at the end of the concert. Partly because of the emotion of the piece that we were doing, and the piece ends in a giant hug, and also just knowing that it was going to be a while before we would do that again. None of us knew. Of course, I was thinking, yeah, God, it might be like a month before we're singing together again. How weird would that be?
And the poetry of that, of actually hugging, right? So now you look back and you think, I don't know if you're like me now, I'm watching films or streaming Netflix with Laurence, and every single time somebody touches or hugs, you're hyper aware of it. You think, oh, there was this time when we used to just all touch each other like that, and God knows when or if those days will really come back. So it must be even more poignant to have a performance where you literally ended in embrace, and then knowing, okay, that's kind of the last time we do that. It's the end of an era almost.
Yeah. It was interesting too. That morning of the performance, with this beautiful Maori ceremony for all of the artists at the Auckland Festival, and of course, as part of the ceremony, you literally touch foreheads and touch nose with the people that have invited you in.
Yeah,
this whole line of people, and just having this moment. And even at the time, we knew the pandemic had started, and so people were invited to opt out if they wanted to. And I think back on it and think, oh my God, thank God we didn't bring the virus to New Zealand.
Oh my God!
Because of course there was much more of a chance of us from Los Angeles carrying it to New Zealand. We were putting people at risk much more than we were at risk ourselves. And of course, if we really knew now what we knew then, at the same time, it was just the most beautiful and just heartrending symbol of togetherness. Literally, what the ceremony is that you breathe the same air. You literally breathe the same air, and that's the point of being welcomed into that country.
This is one of the things that I found so difficult now about the in terms of choirs and the future of choirs, and you know, I have to every day sort of stop myself from despairing, because you'll see these news articles that aren't only just we can't breathe around each other, but very specifically, choirs are a problem. Right, our art form very specifically seems to be we're super spreaders, and somehow the very thing that we do works because we're all in a room together breathing. It's fascinating. I mean, like the poetry of it it's devastating, because I've always felt as a composer and as a conductor, the entire thing begins with the breath. That's the whole point of what we do, right? Mm-hmm. And so then to have that be a threat in a way, it's how are you dealing with that? How are you processing all of that?
Well, it's like you said. I mean, it's devastating, that aspect, and for the entire world of singers, and particularly choral singers and ensemble singers. I mean, it's everything that we valued and have valued over our lifetimes is suddenly called into question as a threat. And I keep reminding myself that, you know, I firmly believe that human beings were singing before we even learned how to speak, and that we've been singing together for thousands and thousands of years, right? And this is it's who we are. It'll come back with it's part of the human experience. It's a huge challenge for us now, and you know, psychically, artistically, emotionally. But I can't help but think that when we are eventually back together again, we'll be able to appreciate how precious that is. And you know, if we ever took it for granted before, if we ever wasted a moment of rehearsal time together, or checked out during a performance mentally or whatever, I mean, now we know just this is precious. This is something to be savored, and it's something that binds us together as humanity. I mean, Eric, you know, we always talk about singing together is, you know, it's literally breaking down barriers. We sing in every language imaginable. We honor every tradition, every cultural heritage. You know, singing together is that thing that allows us all to experience our common humanity in real time. And so this is a momentary, you know, push pause on that aspect of things. And in the meantime, of course, we're finding, like with Virtual Choir 6, we're finding all sorts of ways to connect each other in different ways. And you know, I can't help but think that through the course of the next few months, that there'll be enormous technological advances. Everybody on the planet in the arts is working to find solutions to the latency problem. For instance, you know, the difficulty of singing or playing together in real time, from the world of pop music to Broadway to classical. Everybody is working on this. So I can't help but think that if we look back 2 months from now, we'll see how primitive our technology was, and how much easier it is to make music together. But you know, we all know at the same time, it's no substitute, and it will never be a substitute for breathing the same air, linking ourselves, you know, as you've talked about, Eric, so eloquently, aligning our heartbeats, aligning our breaths, you know, aligning our common humanity in singing. And so again, it's a temporary pause.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's good actually for you to say that, because sometimes I just need a little shot of optimism. It's ironic for me watching myself from the outside, because I think I'm one of the more optimistic people I know. You know, generally it's like, yes, it's an opportunity to learn whatever the thing is. And this one has really shook me to my foundation. I don't know if it's because of the age that I'm at, or if it's because just the shock of how it rolled out, where we sort of, there's this thing. It's a thing. Our entire art form is not happening anymore. You know, I don't think I could have imagined that was And so it's good to have the shot of optimism and be thinking about the other end.
Yeah.
You didn't start though as a vocal person, right? Just like me. I mean, you started as a pianist, right? That's where this all started for you.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the short version of it is my mom was a pianist and a piano teacher, and so I grew up with it. My older brother and older sister were taking piano lessons, and so when I was 5 years old, I mean, I just really just insisted on, I was picking out, tunes from Mary Poppins, which was like the big hit movie at the time, on the piano, and so I started as a pianist, and in my freshman year of high school, I went to a high school, Alhambra High, here in Southern California, that had very good choral program. And so I joined the choir, but I joined as the accompanist. And in November of my freshman year, I had a spectacular gymnastics accident where I fell off the high bar and broke my left arm, and like real and not like simple, but it was like really bad, and had some nerve damage to my fingers.
Oh.
Long and short of it was I couldn't play the piano for about 9 months. I was in a cast and then traction, and but I was signed up for choir. I was enrolled in the class, so I got drafted into the tenor section. And that I found like is where I found my tribe. The summer after my freshman year, my parents shipped me off to music camp to Idlewild Arts, and I did the choir program there, a 2-week program where we spent the whole 2 weeks rehearsing the Mozart Requiem leading up to a performance. And I was this little kid. I was 13 years old, and in this group with 120 other choir geeks. And like I said, I felt like I found my people. And I know that a lot of people who maybe are watching this have had similar experiences of, I call it finding my tribe. And so from that point on, I always sang. I went back to the piano, but I was always singing in the choirs. When I went to college, I chose Chapman University because I had a great choral program. And then I transferred up to USC. And even though I was a piano major, I sang in the chamber singers. And so I was a complete and total choral geek. And when I graduated college, I was working mainly as a pianist, and I got a job at LA Opera. And then I gradually started conducting. Esa-Pekka Salonen became like a mentor to me. He had just become the music director of the LA Philharmonic. And so I was starting to conduct, and had a few experiences with choirs, and specifically with the LA Master Chorale in the 90s. A couple of times they hired me to prepare the chorus for Philharmonic concerts when they were doing like really gnarly new music, like Boulez and Ligeti and Varese and Messiaen, and so I was like that kid. They would say, "Ask Grant, he'll do it." But I found that like one of my special powers seemed to be that I really enjoyed working with a choir on like really crazy, challenging music. And so when the position opened at the LA Master Chorale in 2001, when Paul Solomonovich, the great legend, who had been in the position through the 90s, announced that he was going to be stepping down, I was encouraged to throw my hat in the ring. And I thought, there's no way that they would hire me, because at that point I had very little experience actually conducting a choir. I'd sung in choirs, all this time, but I'd been away for years and years. Anyways, it was crazy. They hired me, and here it is, almost 20 years later. I mean, it's a dream come true. It feels like it allowed me personally to put together all of the things that I had learned up till now, as a pianist, as a singer, as a choral musician, as an orchestral and opera conductor. This was like the synthesis to be working with a group of professional singers at this really, really high level.
Yeah, and then also to start to build a program, which I want to talk to you about later too. I mean, it's a beautiful, winding way to get to where you're at, right? It isn't funny too, if had you not broken your arm, then who knows where it would have all taken you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's one of those things at the time, it doesn't seem like a great thing.
You know? That's my first thought was this choir director who finds this dream freshman pianist who can really play, you know, fantastic. Here's all this literature I wanted to do forever. And then in November, like, what? Right before the holiday concerts and everything. What a phone that must have been. So it's fascinating to me that you were saying that Esa-Pekka Salonen first was like you said, maybe a first mentor in terms of conducting. And did you find that not only him seeing your inherent musicality, which by the way, I won't gush too much, but I have really seen very few musical minds like yours. So I'm certain that he saw in young Grant Gershon this genius level mind working with the music. But in terms of conducting, do you think he saw that you had the qualities? Do you know what I mean? Like was it okay? Come do that, or was it just you're the only other person he can talk to at this high level about this difficult music?
I don't know. You know, we spent the summer together in 1992 at the Salzburg Festival. I was hired as a pianist and coach for a production of Messiaen's opera, Saint Francois d'Assise, St. Francis of Assisi. So we worked together really closely for 10 weeks because Esa-Pekka was the conductor of the production.
That's an incredibly difficult opera, right? God.
I mean,
do you speak French, or did you speak French at the time?
Yeah. At that point, I had worked in Paris for I think about 9 months on different projects and all.
Nice.
But anyways, so at the end of the summer, at the cast party after opening night, I remember Esa-Pekka took me aside, and he said, you know, I think that you have the personality to be a conductor. and I thought, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. Because honestly, I mean, part of the reason why I think hesitated about conducting was in my experience, you know, and this is because the conductors that I was working with as a young person were from this generation of conductors that were autocrats, you know, that was my way or the highway. You know, and famously just jerky behavior on the podium, right? And so Esa-Pekka was one of the first, along with like Simon Rattle, one of the first of this new generation of conductors who were so much more collaborative and really seeing the music from the player's point of view. And you know, I always remember Esa-Pekka talking about he feels that the conductor's role is to create a framework within which the musicians can create the music at their highest level of expression. So rather than micromanaging every detail, it's trusting your artists, again, creating, in a sense, a grid in time that allows for the full expression, but is also there in real time, so that you're constantly, you know, listening, reflecting back the information, the energy, the emotion, the musicality from your players and singers. I mean, that was, I guess, the biggest lesson that I learned.
What I love about that, Grant, is I'm quite certain that I took some of that watching you. So Eric, I was just going to say the opposite. I mean, that's something, and again, I mean, for everybody that has sung under you, it's that same thing. You are so in the moment, like with every phrase, and you're breathing with the singers, and that's what creates this trust. Yeah, right. It's trust, right? That somehow. Yeah, and I love what you also say about the lack of hierarchy, because when you come at it from a tyrannical point of view, you might get some results, you know, but it's always from fear. And you can't help in human nature, if you're under a fearful tyrant like that, you can't help but be looking for the cracks and the hypocrisies, right? So in some ways, you can't ever slip up, right? Otherwise, right, everyone's looking for that moment. It's a terrible way to make, and how do you make music together like that? But within that, I remember being, so I'm just like this emotional hurricane. I think I'm really coming to realize this about myself. I used to just think this was my superpower, and I just feel. And then I slowly over the years, I started to realize that actually me feeling, and I mean really feeling, like expressing all of that, was kind of getting in the way of leading a group of people. You know, and I'm not even sure I can put language in, but we weren't moving together, right? And I remember early on seeing Esa-Pekka conducting the LA Phil, and by far my favorite performance of Rite of Spring of all time, of all the performances I've ever seen, him conducting from memory in tune. And there's not a lot of fireworks. You know, usually that's a piece for conductors to kind of do their thing. You know, you can actually see in their performance all the time they spent in front of a mirror, you know, getting this moment just right. And I was always struck by with Esa-Pekka, it was like, he's just going to make it unbelievably clear and then let these players do their thing. And it's almost like you can feel everybody in the orchestra lean in, like, okay, we're running like a horse, right? He's got the reins, but we're doing all the running. And personally, I had never experienced that before with the choir. My experience always with the choir was that as a conductor, your will is their will. You're kind of pushing it. And it wasn't until I started watching you work with the Master Chorale that I realized, no, actually, you can do that thing. You can, like you say, a framework. It's not without emotion, but it's the attention seems to be more on being unbelievably clear and concise. And then suddenly this thing flowers open. Are you doing that consciously when you're conducting?
Well, I'm not sure if it's conscious or not, but a couple things come to mind, and you know, one of them was working with Peter Sellars back in it was back in the 90s, and it was another experience that we had in Salzburg, and he was working with a choir that was very well trained, and I think this was on the Ligeti opera, Le Grand Macabre, which is again an insanely difficult piece.
Yeah.
It may have been that, but the chorus was they were working with him for the first time, and of course working with Peter is very unlike any other experience for any of the listeners who have seen him in action. And you know, the chorus started out at the first rehearsal very rigid and very kind of hung up on every note being correct, and you know, every vertical moment being exactly lined up. I mean, things that we want to have happen, but it was to the detriment of the bigger expression. And you know, Peter worked with them, and in this very open-hearted way, and he got them laughing, and you know, just like being silly and ridiculous, and then telling these stories and images that were just touching people in a really deep way. And you know, he was in tears at times, you know, talking to them, and they were feeling that. And afterwards, he told me, if you treat people like artists, they will be artists.
Huh.
And I always took that to heart, and the idea also of shared responsibility. When you're conducting a group, you have to empower your musicians. You know, if they feel like you're up there giving them, you know, dictating to them everything so that they can't make their own kind of invested decisions,
yeah.
Then you're taking the power away, and you can feel that in a performance. You know, when I see a choir or an orchestra where the players are invested, empowered, have ownership,
yes,
of the music making, I mean, that's when there's an energy and a communication that you just can't achieve any other way. And so I guess the long answer to your question is, I don't think it's conscious on my part, but I think the imperative and the prioritizing the the invested music making from everybody in the room is, that's the ultimate goal in rehearsal and performance.
Absolutely. And then that comes from you, though. That I've found over and over. That's top down. Or like you said with Peter, right? That he's the one that, like, somebody needs to stand in front of the group and give everyone permission, or at the very least set the framework for your artists now, right? So this is who we are. That's the role that we're going to play. And then it's interesting. There are techniques to do that kind of thing, right? Like skill sets that you can learn. I remember watching, it must have been Claudio Abbado, but he was talking about that sometimes he'll be working with an orchestra and that he will on purpose be as unclear as possible. So, right. So in performance, he's just doing this, right? And you're in the audience thinking, I couldn't follow this guy if my life depended on it. But it's on purpose because he knows the minute he goes off the rails, everybody has to play on their own, right? And I think he probably even plays it as a game at that high level. It's like, okay, you're not really with me. Okay, right? So there's a technique to it. And that's what I've found watching you rehearse the choir is you seem to have, from the moment the rehearsal begins, it's a way of introducing the piece, a way of leading through the piece. I think if I was sitting from the outside, I remember watching and just thinking, where is the magic happening? Do you know what I mean? Like trying to, and it's this kind of cumulative thing. And then suddenly, oh my God. And it's so consistent. Every time I've seen you work, there's just this moment where it unfolds. But what you're saying is for you, well, let me ask this question then. In terms of technique, do you plan out a rehearsal? And I mean, really plan it out? Like, okay, I start with this and that'll lead to this and this concept and this. Did you do a lot of pre-planning?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm obsessed with rehearsal technique and rehearsal efficiency. Because, we've all been in rehearsals where things were bogging down or not productive. And anyways, it's something I'm really obsessed with. So it's partly strategizing, looking at how much time you have and kind of plotting out, but it's driven in the end by what do we need to achieve in this rehearsal on each given piece or each movement of a larger piece that we're rehearsing. Where are we going to be starting the rehearsal from, and where do we need to get to by the end of this rehearsal? And if you have that in mind really clearly, then you can create the framework. But you have to have that first, and you have to have realistic expectations. One of the things that drives me crazy is when a conductor will let a group crash and burn in rehearsal. I find that really, really deeply counterproductive. I always try to create a framework in rehearsal for success. And so, of course, it helps if you know the group well. And with the Master Chorale in LA, of course, we know each other very well at this point. So I can usually kind of guess where, what speed we should go at. But there are certain pieces that we can sight read through the first time and get a sense of what that is. And so if that's possible, that's great. But I'm never going to sight read through something that I don't think they can get through without crashing and burning, because then it falls apart into chaos and you have to regroup and people are talking and trying to figure out what went wrong and
confidence in the piece. And also they lose love for the piece if they're being introduced for the first time. Their first impression is this is a disaster, right? This doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
So maybe instead of sight reading it through, if it's more challenging, we'll go through first, just on syllables, just on na 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 or lu lu lu. We'll slow it down. If it's super complicated, I might just take the tenors and basses first alone. I'm never afraid if it's like completely atonal to just like sing a passage through to them first, especially if it's a high soprano passage. That's another thing. Like, never make your sopranos sight read like up above the staff. That's just it creates you're building in bad habits, because if you can't properly prepare those higher, more challenging passages, you're gonna be rehearsing in vocal problems. So I always tell the sopranos, take it down the octave this first couple of times, get it in your ear. I really want to take care of the singers, and make sure that like every step in the process leads logically to the next step, and that we're building a structure. I don't know. I feel myself. So I just get crazy about this because
I love hearing you talk so passionately. Yeah, because it's I've discovered over years and years of conducting that really it's in rehearsal. That's what makes a conductor, right? Performances are, well, unless you're sight reading on stage, which I've done. That okay, then you really. But that's the. In fact, I don't even have so much fun on doing performances. I'd say all of my top musical experiences happen in rehearsal. You know, performances are a whole other thing. I don't know if you feel that way too, but a conductor that can build a rehearsal like that, a thoughtful, and ultimately it's about, you have to teach the music. And generally, I know for me, because I'm most of the time conducting my own music, it's a dream. Because I know exactly how the thing is put together, right? And I know, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, and that's how this thing goes together. But I remember a couple of years ago with the Master Chorale, you asked me to conduct a couple of pieces, and one of them was the Muya Yaum by Anders Hilborg.
Oh, great! That was
right.
An amazing performance too. Oh my God.
I had nothing to do with the amazing performance. I mean, I was like just keeping time, literally like, okay, what measure am I on? And you sing. But I remember on the phone with you, you basically talked to me about how to teach the piece. That if you start here and make sure they've got this, then that relates to this. And then this will kind of unfold. And actually we've talked to Anders and we've modified this. And you gave me just a very concise way of teaching the piece. And for me, watching you do that, I realized that for you need to know the music as well as the composer. You have to be inside it. It's not enough to just get up and conduct the measure changes and the fermatas. You have to actually understand how the piece is built. And so I wonder first, how much of your day and your preparation is done just learning a piece of music? And the second, how do you do it? Is it at the piano? Do you with pencil and paper? Listening? How do you do those things?
Yeah, it's a combination. Sometimes at the piano if it's really complex. Oftentimes it's just at the desk marking things out. But it comes back to something that you said earlier, in terms of the teaching process, and especially working with singers, specifically with choirs. And I know any conductor who is watching this knows this as well, that you have to be able to sing every part. And before rehearsal for any piece, I'll sing through all the parts. And not well. And I mean, you don't have to be a great singer, God knows. But you do have to, I need to go through the music. I need to know like where the natural breaths are going to be, so that I can give the phrasing. I need to know like what are the challenging intervals, like where are people going to have an issue maybe. Just like there's no substitute for singing through the piece, and then you learn so much about the experience that the singers are going to have in rehearsal. And that way you can anticipate, about 90% of the issues. And so I can answer all the questions before the hands go up, which is another like big thing that I'm trying to remember. Efficiency,
right? Yeah, because especially, you can spend half the rehearsal answering questions like that. So if you could be in front of it. But then I find it's deeper than that though, Grant. It's like, that's all the technical stuff, but you also understand the structure of a piece. You get inside it and then see, like when you're doing the Morton Lauritsen, the O Magnum Mysterium, right? When you did that, I was watching you conduct and I was thinking, Morton was sitting in the audience, Morton Lauritsen, and thinking, this must be his dream performance because it's got its own coherence. Like every tempo and every dynamic and every phrase was built logically around the rest of the piece. And so you just know it. You know it as well as I imagine Morton does. And that to me seems like even deeper score study than just I want to make sure I know, where the natural breaths are. It's really understanding it at a deep level. Do you find now at this time in your career, in your life, that you can do that much quicker than you used to be able to do? Or is it just intuitive? How is it for you?
Oh yeah, it is definitely faster. I remember, again, going back to Esa-Pekka, when we did the Ligeti Gra Macabra in the 90s, and it's just super complicated. I mean, one of the most insanely complex operas that I've ever experienced. And I was his assistant on that. And I had spent months preparing the score because I was going to be leading some rehearsals. And I remember, I asked Esa-Pekka at the first rehearsal, quietly in the corner, so how long did you take to prepare the piece? And he said, a week. And I was like, dude, what? How is that even? I mean, it's a huge score. Every page is like a giant puzzle to be solved, and there's like 500 pages or whatever. And I remember him saying, it gets easier. He said, what I've learned over time is what to focus on, and what to, and what to ignore or to leave aside. He said, if you take in every bit of information in a score that complicated, you can't get past the first page.
Yeah.
And he said it just came with time. The more you spend studying scores, and I think I found that for myself, that it's much quicker for me now to look at a piece, and I can kind of easily see some of the structures, or I know what to look for. Maybe that's the best way to put it. But I will say, just going back to O Magnum Mysterium and the Morton Lauritsen, two things. One is, the first time that I conducted that with the Master Chorale in my second or third season, of course, the Master Chorale premiered the piece. They commissioned the piece. Marshall Rudder, one of our founding board members, commissioned it for his wife, Terry Knowles, who became the executive director of the Master Chorale. And then, of course, they recorded it on this legendary recording with my predecessor, Paul Solomanovic. So the first time I conducted that piece with the group, I have never been so nervous standing in front of singers, and I've never felt so inadequate. Because there's nothing like conducting a piece with an orchestra or a chorus where they know it 100 times better than you ever know.
Yeah.
They have so much experience. So that is a piece. That's just a special case. That piece now, is so deep in the DNA of the ensemble. And even though at this point there's only a handful of singers in the Master Chorale that sang that premiere performance in the 90s, or that sang on the recording, but it's like this tradition has been passed along, like in other cultures in ancient times, just like from soul to soul. And so the group now still has it, like, again, so deep down in their essence, in their DNA. So that's a special case. I mean, to be, when we have the opportunity to do O Magnum Mysterium with Morton Lauritsen himself there, I mean, it feels like we're just, it's like having Bach or Mozart or, or Brahms,
right.
With the group that premiered the Brahms Requiem or something. I mean, it's like, you just stand back as a conductor and kind of like, just make sure that, like, a few things, again, you just create a framework and just let the magic happen.
Yeah, yes.
Get out of the way.
Get out of the way. That's a huge lesson, though, for conductors, don't you find? That this happened to me. This was several years ago. I was conducting the Minnesota Orchestra, and it was a concert mostly of my music, of the orchestral music I'd written, but then also chorus. We were doing a piece that I wrote called Equus, which just means horse, and it's ludicrously difficult to conduct. I mean, it's stupid difficult. It's Gustavo Dudamel did it with you remember at the Hollywood Bowl, and
yeah.
And he came off stage, and all he said to me, passed me and said, "Ooh, that's hard." so I thought, okay, if Gustavo is struggling, I mean, every time I conduct it, I think, what idiot wrote this, right? So but I was working with Minnesota Orchestra, and I felt just like you did. I felt like I have no business standing up here, right? I'm like, I faked my way up to standing in front of this world-class orchestra and choir, and I shouldn't be here. I'm only here maybe because I conducted it, but probably other forces even then, or that I composed it. And then frankly, I was getting so nervous that I was getting sick during the breaks. You know, I'd go into the dressing room and I'd get sick to my stomach. I was so nervous. And there was this one section, it's like 16 bars, that I simply couldn't solve. It's in theory, you're just keeping the beat, right? But no one else is on the beat. It's written that way. It was my little clever homage to Stravinsky. Never thinking that one day I'd have to conduct the damn thing. And so I'm just doing this, holding on for dear life to the beat. And it became pretty clear to everybody that the problem during the dress rehearsal was me. I was the problem. You know that horrible feeling when a really high-level musician knows that it's you that is holding everyone back? Yeah, right? And so not knowing what to do, I said to the orchestra, to the concertmaster, I said, can we try something? I'm going to conduct you right up to letter K. And when we get to letter K, I'm just going to put my hands down. And we're going to do these 16 bars. And when we get to the end of it, I'll pick it back up and we'll go. Okay. And the most amazing thing, we got right up and I got there, and then you just saw the whole orchestra. They owned it, like, right? They took this ownership of it. They played it better than I ever could have conducted. And that was this great lesson for me, like you said, which is sometimes the best thing you can do as a conductor is actually just get the hell out of the way, right? Just let them do their thing. It's thrilling when it happens, but it's so counterintuitive, right? You feel like when you're up there that you need to be making all of it happen, but actually when the musicians know it well enough, they're going to run with or without you in a way, and you just ride the wave.
I remember Sean Kirchner, who's a mutual friend of ours.
Brilliant.
He had this great analogy for a situation like that of hang gliding, which I've never done, but I can imagine what it feels like when you're running along and you have that solid ground under you, right? Which is that feeling when you're conducting an orchestra or a chorus and everything is linked in. And then there's that moment you get to the cliff and you have to trust. You have no choice.
Yeah.
You get out of the way, right? And suddenly,
that's it. Yes, and you have to trust. That's the word right there, right? You have to, at some point, at least for me, it becomes very human and very emotional, that I'm going to, it's not even about controlling the moment. It's actually trusting these people on stage, right? And the irony, of course, is they're making all the music anyway, right? There's a funny game conducting where it's like, what am I really doing? You know? And you must especially feel this as a pianist, right? And as a singer, where you're used to, in another life, actually making the music, right? And then here in this moment, it's just an odd feeling. But that ultimately I find that, yeah, that's what it is letting go my sense of control and having this beautiful trust in the people on stage. Every time I have that experience, that taking off experience, as Sean describes it, I feel like I become a slightly better person, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I think it's one of the hardest lessons for conductors to learn. And it's this interesting thing. You talked earlier about rehearsals and the fact that the heavy lifting for a conductor, I mean, to me, the conductor's performance is the rehearsal. And when the performance comes around, if you've done the work right, that's when you're kind of like 90% out of the way, because you're not making the music. I mean, you're not making the sound. That you have to pass that responsibility on to the artists.
Yes.
And so, I mean, you're still there. There's, I mean, I like to think there's still a role for us in performance. It's
well, someone has to take the bow at the end. That's what I always think. That's super important, and you need to know. Okay, now who gets this? Now the concertmaster, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot to. So I still think we're valuable at the end, especially like just traffic cop.
Yeah, because it'd be awkward.
Yeah, it's really awkward. That's And then also we were talking about, you said even, younger when you were working with the Master Chorale on Manumisterium and feeling nervous and inadequate, did you still get stage fright? Do you still get butterflies when you're working?
Oh, sure. I mean, now I like to think of it as being keyed up or but I mean, there's two things. One is when I first started to make the transition from being a pianist to being a conductor, those like 6 or 7 years, I think, were the hardest years of my life. I felt, I mean, I felt so inadequate in so many different situations. And there were so many times when I just about, broke the baton over my knee and just said, I'm going back to the piano. I stuck with it. And luckily I was working with players and singers that were forgiving and willing to kind of go with it. But, these days I find that the only times that I really get like super nervous or stage fright is those times when it doesn't feel like we're quite where we need or should be for the performance, and that it's going to take like an extra, that extra kind of miracle stuff.
Yeah, the miracle stuff.
Miracle stuff. I'll trademark that.
Somehow it's doing.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I'll say is, because I do conduct a lot of opera, and that's a whole other ballgame. Mostly in concert performances, the variables are fairly in control because you
moving or throwing spears or finding elements.
Yeah, there's in opera, it's like, I mean, it's amazing that any opera performance, it comes out without like major disasters, because, the singers might be 100 feet upstage and looking in a different direction. The orchestra can't always hear the stage, especially if the winds are positioned under the stage. They can't, follow their ears like any musician would naturally do. You might have crazy staging with singers, singing on their heads or lying down bent over backwards. You've got, costume, malfunctions. You've got, I mean, it's just like, and the fact that the singers are all memorized and trying to remember their staging. And, there's just so many variables. So generally in concert performance, like at the end of the performance, I'm looking pretty good. Like, the hair, like everything, like, there might be a little, glow. Opera performances, you're just a sweaty mess. I mean, it's just like
you're really working. Right? You're really working. I'm always struck by, I did some musical theater and operatic conducting way back, just summer stuff. But I was always struck by the idea that not only do you have to memorize or know the score inside and out, and then know the orchestra and be dealing with all this, you also have to know where people are going to be when you need to cue them. It's like the sopranos in a choral concert will always be there. It's not like you're going to be down here working with the strings, then look up and nope, they've all gone to this side of the stage, right? It's also this moving target. It's so crazy that way. Okay, so then I totally get that. That then a traditional choral concert, for instance, is relatively anodyne in that they're all going to be in the same place and doing what you expect. So you were telling me about the newest John Adams opera, the one that you conducted. What's it called?
Yeah. Girls of the Golden West.
So it's
Puccini, except it's plural.
Yes, there's more Girls of the Golden West. And by all accounts, reading about this, it's Herculean to perform, right? That it's John has taken his style now and developed it to this level where he's really pushing all the forces kind of to their limits, right? In terms of what he wants to do. And I remember when you came back and you said that that really, like, you gave the downbeat, and then it is every ounce of focus you have for the next 3 hours, right? That like you can't for a moment slip, right? Because of all the meter changes, everything going on. Does that feel like an Olympic event to you? Does that still feel crazy challenging to you as an artist?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, those kind of pieces. I mean, Girls of the Golden West is a great example of, it's like, I mean, I don't play a lot of video games, but it is kind of like, it's like, playing like a super intense, a super intense video game for 3 hours, where if you make a single mistake, like, it's not just game over and you start again, but it's like, pandemonium. So there's no pressure. But yeah,
you can actually stop the orchestra in its tracks, right? I've done that before. Yeah, back in Summer Stock Theater, I've actually stopped the orchestra and had to yell out letter X, like, so that we can start again.
Yeah, and it comes back to that thing of, in concert performances, it's very rare to like be in a situation where everything can go off the rails, like at a heartbeat. In an opera, and especially a new opera, and especially like a hugely complex piece like Girls of the Golden West, I mean, everything is on a tightrope, without a net. I mean, the other thing about that experience was we had an amazing cast of singers, both for the premiere in San Francisco at the opera, and then when we revived it last season in Amsterdam. And it was the exact same cast of 7 people. Thank God, because that's something I truly don't know how they do it. Julia Bullock and Devon Tynes, Ryan McKinney, Janae Bridges. I mean, because they have to memorize this incredibly intensely complex music where every phrase is a minefield, right? I mean, every phrase has meter changes, and the orchestra is, it's like that passage of Equus that you described, where it sounds like the beat isn't necessarily the beat in the orchestra. So, so you're getting weird information from the pit. And Peter Sellars is asking you to do insane staging at the same time, and you're having to give this incredibly intense emotional performance because the piece is, so it's like all these things going on. So I don't know how the singers do it. I mean, they're, every single one of them is just off the charts brilliant and super committed artists.
Yeah, I never understand how they do that as well, from memory, and what devices they're using to memorize. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how in the world, because there's no way you're up there just going 1, 2, 3, 4. Now he's singing. Now it's 3 this time. Now it's 5. Oh yeah, this one's got an extra beat. Somehow you have to, like, it's that musical intelligence where it imprints pretty early, and then you just know it in some way. Do you find that even now when you're singing or conducting, are you still in your mind a pianist? Do you conceive music pianistically, if you know what I mean? Like,
I think that I kind of hear music vertically, which is from the piano, so that you hear so that you're really aware of the harmonic motion, and the vertical sonorities. I mean, I feel like if you have that, and then you have the experience of singing or playing a string instrument or a wind instrument, something that gives you the linear as well, because that's what music is, right? It's that grid of the harmonies and the lines that go along in a line. And so if you can put all of that together, then you can compose music.
I don't know. But one thing I do know is, like, I've found myself, I'm not a great pianist. I'm okay. I joke that I play piano like a composer, which is that I can play any bar perfectly, but then I need to stop and write it down. And I'm not really a singer, but I know that when I'm singing, my whole internal world is about, I'm not thinking like a singer, I'm thinking like a pianist. I've got like, do you know what I mean? Like, if I'm singing a fifth, I know what a fifth feels like in my body. And I'm always amazed at singers who aren't really pianists, who are singing this stuff. And I wonder how they think about music, what does the matrices in their mind look like when they're understanding all of that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also their connection to the orchestra. Is it as simple as I'm waiting for the oboe? Now I'm a third up from that thing. But then that's also, like you said, it's a minefield. That's a choreography of the mind over an entire opera that I just can't even fathom, that you know all of those little touch points.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your example, I mean, what happens if the oboe misses their cue?
Yeah, then you're screwed.
The one thing that you were holding on to. Or,
one thing.
Another thing that's challenging it's just a little bit of a side note, but challenging in opera, and especially in new operas, is, of course, there's a piano reduction that you're rehearsing with for weeks before you hit the orchestra. And the piano reductions, in even the best case scenario, will only give a fraction of what's really going on in the orchestra. And even the best pianist in rehearsal can only, in a piece as complex as John Adams, can only
do the basic stuff, right? Yeah.
So when the singers get with the orchestra for the first time, they're bombarded with so much more information. I mean, it's just like a data rush. And so again, how they can sort that out. And of course, that's when the music staff and the conductor and the coaches can be of help and say, here's what it turns out is the most prominent thing in the orchestra that you can latch onto, or here's something that's super dependable, or that thing that we were hearing in the piano all that time. You actually don't hear that in the orchestra at all. So.
At all, yeah. Or it sounds super percussive on the piano, and it turns out, nope, it's going to be all rich and warm and most.
It's the double basses arco.
Yeah, exactly. So sorry. Good luck with the tempo. My favorite part when I was doing summer stock was always doing all the piano rehearsals and then getting to the first orchestral rehearsal and just hearing it come to life with the orchestration. Right, it's so thrilling, and I can remember. Sitting in on a Thomas Addis opera rehearsal, and you hear the piano version of it, and it's like, okay, and then suddenly the orchestra, and it's like, oh my God, it's a different piece. It's also amazing to me how you can conceive as a composer. Well, I've always thought, not to ramble, but I've always thought it was Rite of Spring. I keep going back to Rite of Spring. Like Stravinsky at some point sat down and wrote this all on a score and said, yep, that's going to sound just fantastic. Right? You can sort of approximate the bars at the piano, but you can't get a sense at all of the color. I just can't imagine conceiving at that high level. Right? You know what I mean? Like understanding music in such an abstract way. It's mind blowing to me. But I think you must be doing that, especially when you're preparing these like the Ligeti you were talking about. There's no way the piano doesn't help at all. I mean, frankly, does the Ligeti, does that one have some microtonal stuff too in there?
Yeah.
So it truly doesn't help.
Piano is
it really doesn't help. But then also it's just such a wild, like the orchestra is just this, right? It's a sea of color.
Yeah.
And so the only way to really eat the score and be prepared for it is to know it in this abstract way, this deeply abstract way, which to me starts to really bleed over into a mathematical mind or to a logical mind. First, were you good at math growing up? Are you a math head?
No, not really. No. Our son, Sam, is going to study physics next year in college. And I'm like, where did that come from? Because, I did enjoy math, like up until algebra. And then after that, it was just kind of crash and burn. But the logic of music, I will say, I do geek out over music theory and harmony. Just in this time of isolation, I've pulled out the Bach, the Art of the Fugue, and the Musical Offering, which had just sat on my shelf for years and years. I've never cracked those things. The final things that he wrote, right, along with the B minor Mass.
Yeah.
And so, there's a part of me that geeks out really intensely on this music that is so much based on math and puzzles and intricacies that are almost unimaginable in their complexity.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's it's one of the gifts of this crazy time, is that you have a little more time, some of us at least to like reflect and to go deep into kind of our musical passions and you know and explore like different areas. So yeah, I do kind of geek out on the math thing.
Me too. And to speak to that, I've been doing a number of Zoom calls with classrooms, you know, around, and it's a point that I keep coming back to with the students, which is that I feel like real learning, genuine learning, doesn't happen at a school. I'm all for schools, and I think it's good, especially for our art form. You need to be there with other people, and you also need to be around people who are way better than yourself to just to know what's possible. You know, bring your game up. But I think in some ways, all this distance learning that will probably happen for the next year at least is a crazy opportunity to learn on your own, right? That especially if you're a musician like we are, it's a chance to dig deep into these scores, and in a way you really won't have the time or the structure for, probably very rarely in the rest of your life. It's such an opportunity to get to know these things, and know them in a personal way where you discover them, because that's the best learning there is. I would imagine for you as a pianist, it must just be such a joy to sit down and be able to read through those, you know, like the Art of the Fugue, like to be able to really play those.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is kind of a luxury, as you say. I mean, you know, in normal life, and I'm sure, I know it's true for you and probably for a lot of people watching and listening as well. You know, you're so focused as a musician on the next, you know, the next gig, the next rehearsal, the next performance. You know, you're constantly learning the music that is staring you in the face, and so it's kind of nice to have a chance to just, you know, take in more than you normally would. I mean, I've been listening a lot to Fetch the Bolt Cutters, for instance, the Fiona Apple, the new,
which apparently the album of the year, right? I haven't heard it yet, but
yeah. And she recorded it like in your neighborhood, Eric. She's right there in Venice.
Is she really?
In her living room mainly. And it's off the charts genius. And
that's very pretty. Okay, so that's my next thing to absorb. Is there anything in there that could be transferred to our art form? Is there anything that could be choirized, or right?
Well, actually, there are. I think there are. I mean, especially I can well imagine for sopranos and altos, for like, you know, for treble voices.
It'd be cool to reach out to her too, you know, and see if she'd be game for something, if she's here, you know.
I think she walks her dogs, from what I read online, like in your hood.
We probably passed her then, you know, at some point. It's the one around here that we always keep going by is Bradley Cooper, and it's like, oh, look, Bradley Cooper. And then one night, I'm pretty sure we saw Bradley and Lady Gaga in a car, and it was but you know, living in LA, this is just right.
Whatever. It's like whatever. Sure.
Yeah, whatever. Oh, okay. I mean, there's a whole aesthetic here to try to be cool, right? It's like you see somebody go by and like, just be cool. Just that's the, you know, like not and start fangirling. Okay, so the one last thing that I want to make sure that we talk about. First, Grant, I have to say this reminds me of these epic lunches that we have. You know, like when I first moved back from London and you and I sat down, we must have talked for 3 hours, and I don't think either of us took a breath. And right now we're just talking back and forth about ideas, but I remember that half of that was just, what can we do? What can we do? What can we build? What can we make? You know, somehow every time you and I get together, it's like, okay, who's got Fiona Apple's phone number, right? So, but I wanted to talk to you about the Peter Sellars project. So, one of the things that I love that you are doing with the Master Chorale is you're pushing it into the 21st and a half century. It feels like the whole art form. And I feel like that's from the bottom up. I mean, first, it seems, well, of course it is, but it's this beautiful intention that you have of making the choir is as inclusive as possible, right? That it's the largest professional choir in the United States, maybe in the world. Is there another 100-voice professional choir in the world?
You know, I'm not sure that there is, but certainly in the States, it's
yeah, and it's just a jewel, and every singer in there is phenomenal. It's at such a high level, and it's unbelievably inclusive. And then with each new concert, you never rest on your laurels. It's like you're pushing the art form to its next place. And even when we did The Sacred Veil, the piece that I wrote for the Master Chorale, there was all of this beautiful lighting and the way the text is displayed. It's an atmosphere that the concert hall now is rarely ever just, we're going to stand on stage and sing a concert. And then with the Peter Sellars, you took this way beyond into a realm that I think choirs now are just waking up to the possibilities of. Will you talk just a little bit about that project, the genesis of it?
Sure. And I will say I'm so inspired by what I see from choirs and colleagues all around the world in terms of breaking down the barriers and getting away from the grid of just phalanxes of singers. So I think this is just part of a global push to open up the experience of choral singing. So this project with Peter is it's a piece called Lagrime di San Pietro, which means the tears of St. Peter, and it was the final piece that Orlando de Lasso wrote, the great Renaissance composer. And he wrote it, basically he knew that he was dying as he was writing it. He knew it was the last thing that he was going to write. And he just poured everything that he had learned, not only about music, but about himself, into these 21 individual pieces. And so it's a super intense piece of music to start with. It's 21 movements, all in 7-part polyphony that breaks down into 3 larger sections. So the numerology of the piece is super intense. We do the piece with 21 singers, so 3 on a part, kind of keeping the structure of that in mind. So we asked Peter to stage the piece for us, and I've worked with Peter for many, many years. And one of the things that I had particularly admired that Peter had done was the Bach Passions, the St. Matthew Passion and the St. John Passion, with the Berlin Symphony, the Berlin Philharmonic and Rattle. And so I thought, seeing the way that he works with a choir, what would it be like for Peter to stage this piece, which is entirely a cappella? So there's no barrier between the audience and the singers, and it's almost a 90-minute piece a cappella, so it's an enormous undertaking, and completely foolhardy. It was insane, and Peter told me it was insane to even think about staging this. First off, memorizing 21 individual pieces in archaic Italian, nothing repeats. The counterpoint is so pure that no one individual line makes any sense at all without the other 6 lines. So it's almost impossible to memorize it on your own. Anyways, so it's miraculous what these 21 singers from the Master Chorale have done. And so Peter has basically staged the work. The entire work is a ritual that explores all of these themes of remorse, of grief, of being disappointed in yourself. The piece is about Peter denying Jesus, abandoning Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then denying him before the trial, and then what it is like for Peter to live with this for the rest of his life. And so the piece is essentially Peter as an old man looking back on a life of regret. So it's super intense, emotionally and spiritually. And so we performed the piece for the first time in 2016, staged by Peter, and now we've toured it all around the world, and it's so gratifying to see the response that audiences have given to this piece and to these singers. Specifically, I'll just say really briefly that we were featured at the Salzburg Festival this last summer, and in the front row of the audience, and luckily, I'm with my back to the audience for most of the piece, although I am kind of staged into it, and but I wasn't able to see the audience, which is good, because sitting in the front row right next to Peter Sellars was Arvo Pärt. And of course, all the singers saw that right away and were like, "Yeah, oh my God!" Um, and anyways, and Arvo Pärt told us after the concert that he found the piece incredibly moving, and overwhelming. And so, that's like, I mean, for a bunch of choir geeks like us, I mean, it's like, it's like if Prince or Michael Jackson or or Paul McCartney had come to your concert, and for like a normal person. And,
wow.
I don't know. It's all my way of saying it's been an incredible experience.
It's such a beautiful, delicate piece, and it's. I also love how you're choreographed as well as a conductor. You're barefoot. You're also in a uniform. You move in different parts of the piece. So it's a full. It's this holistic approach to what I love about Peter's staging, and I think in general, is it's kind of like if it's on stage, it's a prop to be used. Right? There's no part of the stage that is just going to stay there, right? Everything is part of the toy box. And being in those rehearsals, watching that thing come together too, that was also fascinating for me. What a mind he is, where while it's happening, it's like, okay, is it like, I don't see the rhyme nor reason of any of this. And it's just happening, and then slowly it unfolds, and then he takes a piece from here, a little bit change here, a little push. It's almost like watching someone mold with clay, right? And watching the thing unveil itself, unfold.
It really is true. Eric, I remember really vividly that you were at one of those very early rehearsals where we were just starting to stage a couple of the madrigals. And so you really saw it from like the whole process, and you probably saw the terror in our eyes as we started to realize how insane this project was. But the thing about Peter, and one of the things that I've really taken to heart as a conductor and as a leader is that everything that he asks is based in the music and in the poetry. It's a very clear direction, but he asks us to go deeper and be more honest with ourselves than most of us are comfortable with. And when the artists are willing and trusting enough to go there, which they have in this piece, then that informs everything else that you do in your life.
Totally.
And so having this kind of experience, these singers sing the Brahms Requiem different now, and they sing the B minor Mass differently, and everything that we do is informed by those kind of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So it's why it's so beautiful and so important that we create situations and experiences for our singers to grow, because if they grow in one piece, again, that will lead over into everything that they do.
Yeah, and then ultimately it starts becoming a life, right? You're changing lives, and of the singers themselves. Not that you're doing it personally, but you're building this framework for the possibility of transformation. I always felt that's the whole goal for me as a composer, is that I want to transform the performers and the artists, even if it's this simple little 3.5 minute piece that you're going to start here, but by the time you finish that journey, you've been changed by the experience. And the only way I feel you can get to that is exactly what you're talking about, is that there's no word for it. I guess a kind of vulnerability, but more than that, trust that you're going to get to the end of this and it's going to be okay. And the best you can do is just be present for the moment and trust that this is going to unfold the way that it's supposed to. Yeah, ultimately that's a metaphor that I would really love to have in my daily life, I think.
Yeah, being present. I think that's the key for all of us in music making, in life, in quarantine.
Do you find, I know I do for myself, that those moments of true presence happen more often in music than in regular life? And for a while I idealized that, I really wanted that. And then I would kind of beat myself up because I would think, Well, it's easy in the snow globe environment of of a musical performance to have these moments of presence, right? It's so prescribed in a way that life is really great on stage. Do you know what I mean? Like the worst thing that can happen is somebody misses their cue. But in general, everything is written out. Everything is happening. It's unfolding. We're generally dealing with music that is written at an unbelievably high level. And so it's an idealized version of that. But when you get out into the real world, like the Zen Buddhists always say that, that the meditation is the easy part. It's trying to be present in the real world. That is the challenge. Do you find yourself taking lessons from your musical life into your daily life? Has it transformed you?
Yeah, I mean, I should. That's for sure. Yeah, I think it's one of the privileges for all of us that are musicians and that are artists, is that we're in this situation where we can connect to something greater than ourselves on a regular basis, and I think that if we allow that to happen, when we're singing the B minor Mass or the Verdi Requiem, we're touching something that is so profound and so beyond like the normal human experience, that if we're able to take any elements of that and just into our lived lives. And I suppose that the great thing about music is that it is a time art, right? That it is a progression of moments, and that our lives are finite. That's like our lives in a microcosm is the experience of a piece of music, and so if we can keep that realization that we're constantly in a phrase, we're constantly in motion that has spirit behind us and guiding us. If we can 5% of the time even acknowledge the truth of that, then that kind of makes it worth it to be an artist and to be a musician. And if we can translate that then into the listener, then that's a gift that we're able to give.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. Maestro, I'm looking at the time. We've been talking, believe it or not, for 83 minutes now.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and you and I talked before, and I even asked her. Right? I know you and I we honestly could go 4 hours, and all we need is just another coffee in an hour. I was going to have questions come in, but I think actually that's the perfect way to end this. It's just thank you for what you said. It's so beautiful.
Well, Eric, thanks so much for having me, and I'm so excited about Sing Gently, and I'm about to record my track this week.
Are you really? Will you do it?
Yeah, I just haven't decided bass or tenor.
Tenor. Tenor. If you,
I did notice the numbers are.
Yeah, always tenors, and you've got such a good tenor voice. Yeah, if I can throw in my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll warm up. But thank you for having me, and thank you. You are too modest, because your residency here with the LA Master Chorale over these 4 years has been transformative for me and for this ensemble. You mentioned The Sacred Veil, which is this enormously powerful and deeply, deeply moving piece that you premiered with the group that we recorded. You spearheaded our Big Sing initiative, which has been just off the chart.
That was amazing. More special experience in my musical life.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so many mind-blowing concerts and experiences and premieres. I mean, we just feel so lucky to have been a part of your life. During this time. So
thank you for saying that, truly, Grant. And it's all you. You reached out to me. You started the invitation. I'm so humbled by that. And as I was saying in the introduction, I grew, I learned, I changed by being around you and by those amazing singers. And the moment we're all back to making music together again, I cannot wait to see what you do next. I really just can't wait to see where you take all of this.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.
We'll talk soon. Yeah.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers. So, Grant Gershon, what to even say? I mean, you see in Grant such a mind at work and such a musical mind. And then also this genuine, truly genuine humility that he brings to each gesture that he makes as a conductor. It's a kind of special alchemy that I have rarely seen, where he stands in front of a group and just very quietly leads with such conviction and with such force. It's almost impossible to describe until you see it happening in front of you. And I've learned so much, as I said before, from him, from my time there with the Master Chorale. I should probably have him back on and we could just talk about the things that happen at Master Chorale. He mentioned, by the way, The Sacred Veil, which is this big hour-long piece that I wrote with Charles Anthony Silvestri as poet. And we recorded that right before the quarantine in January. And that's coming out, I think, this summer, the end of this summer. And I'm really excited for that to come out. A very special and warm place in my heart for the piece and for the singers that sang it, the Master Chorale, and ultimately for Grant. I didn't get a chance to thank him for this, but Grant is also one of those rare conductors who just hands over the keys to the Ferrari and says, "Yeah, take it out for a spin." That's a rare thing in a conductor to have that kind of humility and that kind of trust. So thank you so much, Grant. Thank all of you for listening. It's been amazing spending this hour and a half with all of you. Be well. If any of you are virtual choir singers, please, please, please record your video, if you haven't done so far, this weekend and upload it. The deadline is May 22nd, technically. But we know from experience that a lot of singers are going to try to upload their videos at the last minute. And what we're genuinely concerned about is that we're going to crash the servers. And there's no plan B. If we crash the servers, then we're not going to be able to get your video. We need to go immediately into production after that. And it would be so heartbreaking that you spend all the time and attention preparing the music, getting ready, and then not make the video and not be included in something that I think is going to be truly special. And using the language that Grant used, something part of, being part of something larger than ourselves. Take care, everyone.